TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Twilight draped the waterfront in indigo as families and couples wandered among stalls bright with paper lanterns at the moonlit lantern fair. The salty tang of the Pacific mingled with the scent of jasmine tea and sizzling street food. Strings of glowing orbs, jade greens, sapphire blues, molten oranges, hung overhead like stranded stars, guiding visitors down the bustling pier. Dr. Lyra Carrington stood near a makeshift medical tent, adjusting her crisp white scrub top beneath the pavilion's string lights. As an internal medicine resident at Starlight Memorial Hospital, she volunteered every year to offer free health screenings for underserved families. Yet, tonight, her mind buzzed more with anticipation than medical logistics. She craned her neck to admire the lantern-draped walkways, reminding herself to breathe as she prepared for the dozens of children lined up for checkups. At the far end of the pier, Rowan Blackwood carried a stack of hardcover storybooks for distribution. His nonprofit architecture firm, Blackwood & Company, had sponsored the fair's central booth, aiming to design community spaces that felt like living rooms. Despite the heavy leather satchel slung over his shoulder, Rowan's broad shoulders and easy smile made the load seem effortless. A faint breeze ruffled his dark hair and tugged at his linen blazer, softening the lines of exhaustion from months spent drafting renovation blueprints. The moment their eyes met, it felt as though two currents converged. Lyra lifted her gaze from her clipboard just as Rowan set down the books and straightened his posture. Time slowed, the laurel-framed photo booth shutter clicking in the distance, children's laughter echoing, the soft drumming of a taiko ensemble floating on the air. His cobalt eyes held hers for a heartbeat too long, curiosity flickering there as he stepped forward. A collision was inevitable. Spectators gasped as Lyra pivoted to reach for a child's medical form, and Rowan turned to greet a volunteer, both moving into the same narrow space beneath an arch of lanterns. Their shoulders brushed, and a stack of storybooks tipped, pages fanning out like startled birds. Instinctively, Lyra reached out to steady the books, while Rowan bent at the waist to help her. Fingers touched, and for a moment neither pulled away. "I'm so sorry," Rowan murmured, his voice low and rich. The crowd seemed to hush around them. "I didn't see you there." Lyra's initial surprise melted into a soft smile. "No worries. Neither did I." She tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, revealing the silver star-shaped stud in her lobe, the same star motif painted on the tent behind her. "I'm Dr. Carrington, by the way. Lyra Carrington." Rowan offered her one of the storybooks she had almost toppled. The cover depicted a moonlit forest full of mythical creatures. Rowan Blackwood. "Nice to meet, unexpectedly, at a fair." She laughed, a clear, melodic sound that rippled through the energy of the festival. Unexpected can be good. He straightened, book in hand, and gestured toward the lantern-lit walkway. "Here, let me give you a hand." As they walked side by side, Lyra tucked the medical forms into her clipboard. Rowan glanced at the colorful lanterns, then back to her. "So, you're the medical expert tonight? Checking heartbeats and blood pressures." "Exactly," she replied, glancing around. "And you're the man with the books, right? Designing safe spaces for kids." He nodded. "We're collaborating on a youth art center downtown, turning an old warehouse into a community hub. We thought inviting families here would remind us why it matters." Lyra's eyes lit up. "That sounds incredible. Those kids need places that feel like home." They paused beneath a canopy of golden lanterns. Around them, children in paper crowns danced to a nearby jazz quartet, while vendors hawked candied apples and bubble tea. The lanterns swayed gently, creating a mosaic of warm light on the weathered wood planks. Rowan closed the distance, voice soft. I haven't had a chance to thank you for volunteering. It means a lot. Lyra tilted her head, touched by his sincerity. I love what I do, and it's nice knowing someone out there builds more than just buildings. Maybe, Rowan ventured. We could combine forces sometime. Medical checkups in the mornings, community classes in the afternoons. What do you think? A spark of possibility ignited in her chest. I think that would be amazing. In that moment, beneath the dancing lantern glow, two worlds collided and intertwined. A brush of shoulders, a stack of storytelling pages, a shared vision of hope. The fair faded into background hum as they leaned in, voices dropping to confidences. By the time Lyra returned to her tent an hour later, she carried not just paperwork, but a flutter of excitement. Meeting Rowan Blackwood had shifted something unexpected within her. And as Rowan walked back toward his booth, lantern light reflecting in his eyes, he felt the same. Tonight's unplanned encounter was only the first chapter of a story neither of them could yet imagine. The hospital corridors felt strangely quiet after midnight, a soft hum of fluorescent lights replacing the daytime rush of sirens and hurried footsteps. Lyra Carrington pushed her tired body along the polished linoleum floor, cleaning up the last of her charts after a grueling 10-hour shift in the emergency department. She managed a brief smile when her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket, a lifeline to a world beyond sterile walls and beeping monitors. Rowan Blackwood's name glowed on the screen, and she tapped it open with a sense of relief as warm words unfurled across the glass. Night Owl Doctor, still breathing? Lyra's fingertips hesitated before she responded with a playful sigh. On the fumes of 5 cups of coffee and sheer willpower. A flurry of typing bubbles danced across her screen, and he replied almost instantly. Then don't crash the plane. Amelia Earhart, coffee's running low already. She chuckled to herself, picturing his trademark grin and the loose sketchbooks he kept at his drafting table, filled with half-drawn facades that seemed to materialize under his touch. She leaned against a cold wall, the flicker of sparking emergency lights reflecting off her stethoscope. Someone's got to keep the city alive past sundown, she typed. His next message took longer, and when it arrived, it carried an honesty that made her heart skip. I wish I could borrow some of that calm when I face a ticking clock of deadlines. Lyra tapped out a thoughtful reply, her thumb hovering over the send button as she remembered the frantic child she'd stabilized just 2 hours earlier. Focus and purpose, she wrote. Remembering that every person I help tonight has a life outside these doors, someone who loves them, keeps me steady. She pictured Rowan reading her words in some drafting studio under a single desk lamp, pen in one hand, coffee in the other. Almost immediately, he texted back, "That's brilliant. I might hire you to write my next project's mission statement." Before she could tease him further, a night nurse hurried past, clipboard balanced precariously in one arm. Lyra straightened and tucked her phone away, preparing to finish up her rounds, but her mind lingered on their exchange. Hours of adrenaline-fueled triage melted into a moment of genuine connection that felt as comforting as a well-fitted surgical glove. 30 minutes later, in a small break room half a floor down, Lyra poured the last of her cold coffee into a travel mug and sent one more text into the quiet night. "Thank you for this. You're a good distraction." Rowan's reply arrived so fast that her phone buzzed again before she even set it down. "Anytime. Just make sure you clock out before I convince you to do a midnight blueprint sanity check." She laughed out loud, surprising the lone janitor who offered her a curious look as he rolled his trash cart by. Shaking her head, she tucked the mug into her lab coat pocket and scribbled a quick note on her chart pad before heading back to the ward. Each patient's room she passed reminded her of the stakes she handled every night. Still, in that heady half-hour of texts, the sterile hospital had felt like the coziest place on earth. At 3:17 a.m., a new message lit up her screen. "Coffee and schematics tomorrow at 9? I want to hear more about that pediatric wing idea." Lyra paused in the hallway, tracing the curve of her stethoscope's earpiece. She pictured Rowan's earnest expression, already surrounded by colored pens and blueprint rolls, his office light burning bright. Typing with determined fingers, she replied, "It's a date. Bring your best sketches." As her phone slipped into her coat, Lyra realized that their partnership, born amid the hum of midnight messages, had shifted from casual banter to something more substantial. The city's overnight pulse wound around her like an embrace as she resumed her duties. Each life she touched carried the echo of Rowan's support, and for the first time in many long hours, exhaustion gave way to purpose once more. By dawn, Lyra had handed off her patience, traded her scrub cap for a fresh lab coat, and prepared to face another busy day. Yet in the quiet spaces between emergencies, her mind drifted back to that simple invitation: coffee and schematics. It was more than an appointment. It was proof that two souls, each dedicated to their own calling, could find sanctuary in shared ambitions, no matter how late the hour or how demanding the world outside seemed. The morning sunlight filtered through towering eucalyptus and redwood trees, casting dappled patterns across the lawn at Echo Pines Park. Twinkling fairy lights had been strung from branch to branch, and delicate white lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. Beneath their soft glow, friends and family gathered on folding chairs arranged in neat rows, each seat marked with a sprig of baby's breath tied by pale satin ribbon.
Dr.
Lyra Carrington stepped out from behind a hand-painted wooden arch draped in ivory linen and clusters of wildflowers, daisies, lavender sprigs, and pale pink ranunculus. Her tea-length gown, dyed to match the morning's blush, swept the soft grass, and in her hands she held a bouquet of garden roses and eucalyptus leaves. With every breath she took in the scent of pine needles and fresh blooms, her heart fluttered in anticipation. Behind her, Indigo Hale, the retired nurse who had become baby Ezra's first caregiver, straightened the bride's veil and offered an encouraging smile. "He's awake and ready," Indigo whispered, her voice warm with affection. "He's been practicing his big boy grin all morning." Lyra laughed softly, smoothing the fabric over her shoulders. "I was hoping for tears of joy," she teased, feeling a wave of calm wash over her. She took one last steadying breath and stepped forward, guided by the gentle strums of an acoustic guitar. At the front of the aisle stood Rowan Blackwood, wearing a tailored slate-gray suit and an ivory boutonniere that mirrored Lyra's bouquet. His usual easy confidence seemed tinged with reverence. He brushed a lock of dark hair from his forehead and smiled as Lyra drew near. The guests rose in unison, a soft rustle of clothing and settling breath echoing in the hush. Their officiant, an old friend from Lyra's residency, cleared his throat and greeted the gathering. "Welcome, everyone," he began, voice carrying easily. "Today we celebrate a love that found its roots in unexpected encounters and grew in the light of mutual respect. Lyra and Rowan have built their lives on compassion and vision, and now they invite us to share in the next chapter." Lyra and Rowan joined hands beneath the arch. She felt the warmth of his grip and saw the steady calm in his eyes. Around them, oaks and ferns formed a living cathedral, and the gentle hum of cicadas provided a natural symphony. Rowan spoke first. "Lyra, from the moment our paths crossed among lanterns and laughter, you've been my compass. You navigate the darkest nights with courage and compassion. I promise to be your partner, in blueprints and bedside vigils, supporting your dreams as fiercely as you support mine." Lyra's voice trembled with emotion when it was her turn. "Rowan, you design more than buildings. You create homes for hearts. With every plan you draw, you remind me of what's possible. I promise to stand by you in calm and in storm, to laugh with you in joy, and to comfort you in sorrow." As they exchanged handcrafted silver and rose gold rings, the sun broke through a passing cloud, spotlighting their joined hands. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and amid hushed anticipation, Rowan lifted Lyra into a gentle kiss. The guests erupted into applause, petals drifting down like confetti. Following the ceremony, tables set with wildflower centerpieces and hand-lettered place cards awaited the newlyweds and their loved ones. Under strings of bulbs, Lyra and Rowan shared their first dance to the soft melody of the guitar, feet bare against the grass. He spun her once, and she tucked her head against his shoulder, inhaling the faint scent of cedar on his lapel. Nearby, Indigo Hale cradled baby Ezra in her arms, rocking him quietly as he cooed when he caught sight of his parents. Marlowe Quinn floated among the guests, offering glasses of sparkling elderflower lemonade, her laughter a bright ribbon through the afternoon air. Throughout the gathering, moments of genuine connection abounded, Rowan's old college roommate wiping a tear from his eye as he toasted the couple. Lyra's fellow residents marveling at how she balanced life-saving work with gentle grace, a circle of children chasing dandelion seeds beneath the trees.
No bawdy displays.
No extravagant flourishes, just honest expressions of love, friendship, and community. As the sun dipped lower, Rowan leaned close and whispered in Lyra's ear, "This, right here, is everything I ever wanted." She smiled, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes, and replied, "Me too." Hand in hand, they walked through their simple wedding beneath the pines, a celebration unadorned yet rich in meaning. It was a day woven from the threads of their shared journey, a promise of every dawn and dusk yet to come. The first weeks after the wedding passed in a blur of pre-dawn feedings and lamplit late nights, as Lyra Carrington and Rowan Blackwood shouldered the mounting demands of their intertwined lives. Each morning, Lyra awoke to the soft cries of baby Ezra before dawn's first light. Her fingers stumbled for the silk edge of his onesie in the dim glow of the nursery nightlight. At precisely 6:30 a.m., she warmed a bottle of breast milk, cradling him in the nursery glider while her mind raced ahead to hospital rounds and critical chart reviews. Often, she managed only 2 hours of sleep before swapping her silk robe for crisp scrubs and heading out into Los Angeles' still-sleeping streets en route to Starlight Memorial Hospital. Meanwhile, across town in Silver Lake, Rowan wrestled with digital blueprints and back-to-back client calls. His firm's flagship project, repurposing an abandoned community center into a youth arts campus, was touted as the next great legacy for downtown. Yet every design revision seemed to spawn 3 more questions. By 7 a.m., he was crouched beside half-built walls at the Echo Pine site, checking beam alignments and negotiating pricing with contractors. He swore nightly he'd be home for dinner. "I'll leave by 5:30, he'd promise. But 5:30 came and went. Building inspectors delayed him, structural flaws emerged, and another urgent email demanded a redesign. On his return, he found takeaway boxes sealed in cling wrap on the counter, flights of steam still faintly rising. The few times they crossed paths each day felt like fleeting cameos. Lyra in her white coat, mask hanging loosely beneath her chin, offering a tired smile as she passed. Rowan in his blazer, tie loosened, clutching a travel mug of cold coffee and a briefcase. Their eyes held equal parts apology, longing, and fatigue. Lyra slipped a post-it into Rowan's jacket pocket. "Lunch tomorrow at noon? I miss you." And he, hours later, left an answer in her scrub pocket. "Can't make it. Meeting overrun. Soon, I promise." Beneath the humor lay a shared ache. At the hospital, Lyra navigated a relentless roster of emergencies. Dehydration in infants, lacerations from industrial accidents, chest pains that arrived on gurneys. She directed trauma teams with the calm precision of a seasoned conductor, every command crisp, every decision life-saving. One night, a cyclist careened into a lamppost at high speed, shards of glass glinting like tears on asphalt. Lyra orchestrated the reversal protocol, her steady voice anchoring panicked onlookers. When the child stabilized, she collapsed in the supply closet, chest heaving, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. By contrast, Rowan's nights were punctuated by the soft glow of his laptop screen in their living room, where he wrestled with renderings and grant applications long after Lyra had closed her eyes. He would hear her breathing in the dark, turn to reach for her, but she was already gone, summoned back to the hospital by an urgent page. Their apartment, once a cozy refuge, became a way station between memory and exhaustion. Blueprints lay scattered on the dining table alongside open patient charts and half-drunk coffee mugs. The baby's bassinet sat between Lyra's desk and Rowan's drafting table, a silent sentinel of their fractured schedules. On a particularly grueling Thursday, Lyra returned home at 10 p.m. to find the front door ajar. Her heart lurched, fear spiking her pulse, only to discover Rowan hunched at his drafting table, lines of digital ink mirrored in his weary eyes. Ezra slept peacefully in his bassinet. Rowan looked up, face pale under the drafting lamp. "I thought I'd try to catch up here," he said softly. Lyra dropped her tote bag and moved to him, resting her head on his shoulder. He clasped her hand, drawing her strength as he leaned into her warmth. Pressure built not only at home. Rowan's nonprofit backers threatened to pull the plug unless the campus renderings arrived by Monday. "This project is a lifeline for those kids," he pleaded in the boardroom, voice taut. His team rallied, staying late to finalize textures and lighting studies. Meanwhile, Lyra faced her own crisis. A routine medication error left an infant teetering on the brink of overdose. She intervened swiftly, reversing the dose and monitoring vitals until the child stirred. Only then did she allow herself to collapse against the nursery wall, tears of relief mingling with exhaustion. Moments of respite were rare and precious. On Lyra's birthday, Rowan surprised her with a lemon lavender layer cake and a single sprig of fresh lavender. They shared candles and laughter until an urgent call summoned Lyra back to the hospital. Rowan watched her retreating figure and whispered a vow he couldn't yet keep. Weekends offered false hope. They scheduled a Saturday morning trip to the 9th Street Farmers Market. Lyra's pager chirped at 8:02 a.m., multi-vehicle collision on the freeway. She sprinted into an ambulance, leaving Rowan alone amid empty stalls, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers. At home, he set the flowers aside, opened his laptop, and dove back into work. By month's end, both wore exhaustion like second skin. Dark circles under Lyra's eyes spoke of sleepless nights, while Rowan's slumped shoulders carried the weight of looming deadlines. Their plans for date nights and weekend getaways lay buried under layers of responsibilities neither could evade. Their vows, made under a canopy of pines, felt like echoes from another life. Finally, on an unremarkable Tuesday evening, Rowan found Lyra in the nursery, rocking Ezra to sleep by the soft glow of the nightlight. He stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, eyes haunted. She turned, guarded, and he closed the distance between them. "We're drowning," he said, voice cracking. Lyra's lips trembled as she laid Ezra in his crib. "I know," she replied, tears finally spilling. United in their weariness, they embraced. Two people bound by love, yet nearly torn apart by the very passions that defined them. In that quiet twilight, they realized the only way to save their marriage was to rebuild its foundation, carving out fragile pockets of time for each other, even amid the storm of diapers and deadlines. The path ahead would require intention, sacrifice, and the courage to admit when they'd stretched themselves too thin. But as their foreheads rested together, heartbeats sinking under the soft hum of the nursery monitor, Lyra and Rowan knew they would fight, for their family, for their work, and most of all, for each other. It began innocently enough. One evening, Lyra returned home at 8:30 p.m., weary from an 18-hour shift, to discover a kettle already boiling on the stove and the soft scent of rosemary drifting through the apartment. The front door swung open to reveal Rowan Blackwood crouched by the kitchen counter, whisk in hand, as a hearty tomato basil soup simmered on the stove. This was not how most evenings went. Lyra's chest tightened in pleasant surprise and suspicion. "Rowan," she asked, voice crackling with fatigue. He straightened, wiping his hands on a flour-dusted towel. "I thought I'd try cooking tonight." His eyes were soft with apology. Before she could reply, a new voice cut through the quiet. "Actually, I did the cooking." He just assisted. Light, confident, too confident. Lyra turned to see Savannah Rivers, Rowan's project manager, stepping into the entryway. Savannah Rivers had always been efficient and friendly in the office. Bright smiles, quick solutions, a knack for smoothing over Rowan's insomnia-induced oversights. But Lyra had never invited her into their home. Her uniform scrub top was spotless. Her hands bore no sign of kitchen work. I thought I'd help out, Savannah said, setting down a tray of fresh bread. Rowan gave an awkward grin. She insisted. Lyra forced a polite smile. Thank you, Savannah. The soup smells wonderful. She took off her coat, trying to ignore the way Savannah's designer heels clicked on the hardwood floor or how the overhead light caught the subtle sparkle on her engagement-style ring. Rowan cleared his throat. Dinner's ready. Let's eat. They clustered around the modest island tabletop, Lyra with Ezra cradled in a sling against her chest, Rowan passing bowls, Savannah offering up steaming bread. Lyra bit into the soup, its warmth easing some of her tension. But in the way Savannah laughed too easily at Rowan's jokes, leaned into his shoulder when he reached for the Parmesan, and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, Lyra felt a slow, cold dread settle in her gut. After dinner, Lyra prepared Ezra's bottle while Rowan and Savannah cleared the dishes. The pair's conversation drifted into an easy camaraderie, shared inside jokes about design standards, affectionate jabs at contractors who never showed up on time. Lyra shook her head, closing the bottle's lid with a click. I'll take it from here, she said softly. Ezra's bedtime. As she carried their son down the hallway, her voice lowered to a lullaby. Behind her, Savannah's high-pitched giggle and Rowan's chuckle carried out into the living area. Lyra paused at the nursery door, listening to the muted sounds of comfort, wondering when her husband's laughter with another woman had started to sound like betrayal. That weekend, Rowan asked Savannah to drive him to a community fundraiser in Santa Monica, something about finalizing renderings and meeting local stakeholders. Lyra protested, insisting she could watch Ezra while Rowan made the early morning meeting. But Rowan shook his head, weariness lining his face. I need Savannah's help, he said. She looked at him, blue eyes wide with exhaustion. I promise I'll be home in time for lunch. When he left at dawn, Savannah lingered in the kitchen, sipping a latte from a travel mug. Lyra watched her from the hallway, where she stood in scrubs, squat bottle in hand, gazing out at nothing. Savannah scrolled through her phone, then looked up and offered a practice smile. If you need anything, let me know. Lyra managed a tight nod. On Monday evening, Lyra returned home with Ezra asleep against her chest, hair tousled and expression distant. She set him gently in his crib and peeked around the living room. Savannah's laptop was open on the sofa, a rendering of their youth arts campus filling the screen. Rowan's sketchbook lay beside her, pages loose and unguarded. He was back early, a surprise, or so she thought, until he stepped into view, cheeks flushed from the autumn air. Lyra, he began, masking relief as she frowned at the scene. Savannah looked up quickly, closing the laptop. I've got to finish these textures, she explained, backup plans glinting in her calm tone. Rowan dipped his head. Dinner's on me tonight. I'll take care of everything. Savannah offered a quick hug to Rowan's arm, sweet and familiar. I'll see you tomorrow early. Left alone, Lyra stacked the folded laundry that had piled up for days. Thankfully, Indigo Hale, the retired nurse and nanny, had come by earlier and remediated the chaos. Yet even Indigo's steely kindness couldn't erase the tension that clung to the apartment like a winter draft. Rowan's promise of dinner echoed hollowly in her head as she scrubbed wooden spoons and listened to the stomp of the shower upstairs. That night, Lyra lay in bed, Ezra asleep in the bassinet beside her. She traced the seams of their wedding photo propped on the nightstand, lanterns glowing, arms entwined. How slowly that moment had slipped through her fingers. Rowan sank beside her, the mattress dipping with his weight. She watched the darkness pool at his temples. We need to talk about Savannah, she said, voice both timid and firm. Rowan's sigh was tired. I know it's been different, he admitted. She's carrying extra workload, and I've relied on her. Lyra turned to face him, hurt and exhaustion pooling in her chest. She's in my home, cooking our meals, finishing our work, making jokes in my kitchen. What am I supposed to feel? Rowan reached out, but Lyra pulled away. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't realize. I never meant to make you uncomfortable. His words were hallowed by sincerity, but also tinged with guilt's bitter aftertaste. "She's a great friend," he offered. "And she's been underpaid and overworked. I want to support her like she supported me." Lyra pressed her palms to her eyes, blinking back tears. "Support her at work. Not here. Not with my son and me in the next room." He closed his eyes, then nodded, voice low and wounded. "You're right. I'll set boundaries." But boundaries, once blurred, are hard to redraw. Over the next days, Rowan attempted to limit Savannah's after-hours access to his home, sending her conference calls link rather than inviting her over. Yet, at the site, they shared early coffees and whispered design tweaks. When Lyra came home unexpectedly, she glimpsed them leaning close over a laptop, their heads almost touching. And the old ache of suspicion returned. Then, on a Saturday morning, Lyra found a note under her pillow. "Lunch at 1? I've made your favorite carrot ginger soup." It was written in Rowan's precise script. She followed the scent to the kitchen, where Savannah stood by the stove, apron tied neatly, stirring with a wooden spoon. Rowan returned from a site visit, mouth full of bread. "Hey." Lyra swallowed hard. "Why is Savannah here again?" He chewed, then wiped his mouth. "She wanted to help with baby clothes. She's so good at organizing." Savannah flashed her a tight smile. "I love tiny socks." Lyra's voice shook. "This is our home." Rowan's silver-spooned soup clattered on the counter. "Lyra, please trust me." But trust, once cracked, leaked out through every seam. Lyra set Ezra's bottle on the table between them, turning on her heel. The air in the apartment felt brittle, as though at any moment it might shatter. That night, Lyra sat with baby Ezra in the rocking chair, soft lullabies in her throat, wondering how the seed of turmoil, planted by good intentions and nurtured by blurred lines, had taken root in their marriage. She sang him to sleep, a single tear slipping free as she vowed to protect her family, even if it meant uprooting everything she and Rowan had carefully built. Lyra Carrington never saw it coming. One minute she was guiding a restless toddler through his 6 p.m. feeding, humming an old lullaby to soothe Ezra's cries. The next, her vision blurred and the room tilted around her. She set the bottle down onto the changing table and reached out for support, her fingers grazing the smooth edge of the wood. A dizzying wave of exhaustion, deeper than anything she'd felt in months, washed over her. Her legs gave way beneath her, and the fluorescent nursery lights seemed to elongate into streaks of white. She heard Rowan's voice somewhere in the distance. "Lyra?" His tone was frantic, edged with concern. He held her as she sank to the floor, cradling her head gently against his chest. Ezra's soft coos faded into nothing, replaced by the thundering of Lyra's pulse in her ears. She tried to speak, just a whisper to reassure him, but her lips felt numb and her head was swimming. The last thing she registered was Rowan's desperate plea, "Lyra, stay with me," before darkness claimed her. When Lyra opened her eyes again, she was on a narrow hospital bed in a dimly lit examination room at Pacific Coast Medical Center. Beeping monitors kept time with her heartbeat. A bright overhead lamp spotlighted the 4 in her arm. She blinked against the harsh glare and realized she was in a private treatment cubicle, a hospital gown draped loosely around her frame. "Lyra?" A gentle hand brushed her cheek. She looked up to find Rowan, leaning close, worry etched in deep lines around his eyes. His sterile scrubs were rumpled, and his hair was mussed from hastily donning a surgical cap. In one hand he held her other hand. In the other, the faint stain of dried tomato basil soup marked his sleeve. "Rowan," her voice cracked. She attempted to sit up, but a wave of dizziness crashed over her once more. He pressed her back down with gentle urgency. "Easy," he whispered. "You fainted at home, and I rushed you here." She tried to piece it together. The last thing she remembered was stumbling at the nursery. He continued, voice soft but insistent. "Your GP insisted we do a full workup. You were severely dehydrated, exhaustion, plus a minor electrolyte imbalance. They gave you 4 fluids, some blood tests, nothing serious, but you needed rest." Tears stung Lyra's eyes as the weight of his words settled in. She squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I thought I could keep going." Rowan's gaze locked on hers. For a long moment, he didn't speak, his chest rising and falling with the hum of the monitors. Then he drew a breath, as though steeling himself. "Lyra, look at me." She forced her vision to clear. He brushed a lock of hair from her forehead. "I've been so focused on getting that campus designed and watching you care for everyone, I forgot that you're only human." His voice trembled. "I forgot to take care of you." Her throat tightened. All the late nights, unheard promises of dinner, unanswered texts, they coalesced into a single moment of reckoning. She'd felt stretched thinner than ever, but she'd still tried to soldier on. Now here she was, laid low by her own devotion. Rowan pressed her hand to his lips. "I'm so sorry I let it get this far," he said. "You collapsed in our home, and I didn't see it coming." She shook her head. "It's my fault," she managed. "I should have said no more often." He straightened and reached around to the bedside table, picking up a small chart. "The doctors say you need at least 48 hours of complete rest. No charts, no hospital, no calls." His eyes glistened. "I booked a night nurse for Ezra, and I'm taking the weekend off. Off work, off my phone. We're taking care of you." Lyra felt something inside her shift, like a soft hinge creaking open. Rowan's contrition was real, not just for this accident, but for every time she'd been second to his work, and every promise he'd broken under the weight of his own ambition. In that stark hospital cubicle, with the white noise of medical machinery around them, she realized how close they'd come to losing more than just sleep. She reached up, tracing the edge of his surgical cap. "Promise," she whispered. He gave her a small, rueful grin. "I swear," he said, voice unsteady but unwavering. Lyra closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth of his hand. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe enough to let go. Rowan knelt beside her bed, brushing his forehead against hers. The beeping monitors kept their rhythm, steady and reassuring. They stayed there for a long moment, anchored in the truth of their shared vulnerability. The moment of awakening was not just Lyra's physical collapse, it was Rowan's sudden clarity that ambition and devotion must coexist with care and gentleness. When the nurse poked her head in to adjust Lyra's fore, Rowan turned to smile, an unspoken promise passing between them. This crisis had been an unvarnished mirror, reflecting all the ways they'd prioritized everything but themselves. But as Lyra drifted back toward sleep, Rowan's hand still cradling hers, she knew, in that fragile dawn of recovery, they would rebuild their life together with newfound intention. No more empty promises. No more hurried departures. In the hush of that cubicle, they vowed to keep each other from collapsing again. The monitor's steady pulse echoed their commitment. They would face the pressures of family and work, not alone, but side by side, awakened to what truly mattered. Lyra Carrington hadn't meant to pry. She loved her husband, Rowan Blackwood, with every fiber of her heart, and she trusted him implicitly. Yet a single loose moment one sleepless morning would shatter that trust forever. It was 2:17 a.m. when Lyra, exhausted from another marathon shift at Starlight Memorial, crept into their shared home office. The glow of Rowan's laptop screen spilled into the hallway under the door, and she paused outside, a knot tightening in her chest. Ezra, their 3-month-old, was asleep in his bassinet down the hall, wrapped in his favorite quilt. Lyra's shoulders sagged with relief that he was safe, yet she also felt the heavy burden of unspoken worries about Rowan's growing distance. She stepped inside, closing the door softly. Rowan sat at his drafting table, back hunched and brow furrowed, as he typed furiously. His night had stretched long beyond the late evening they had promised each other. His once warm greeting had become mechanical, a cursory, "How was your shift?" before she retreated to feed Ezra. He'd slipped back into work, claiming urgency on the arts campus project. Lyra reminded herself that he loved their family and meant well. Yet every petal of doubt blossomed in her heart. On his desk lay 2 open notebooks, one filled with architectural sketches, the other scattered with notes about break-even analyses and donor proposals. But what truly caught her eye was his phone, face up next to the keyboard. It lit up with a new message notification from Savannah, his project manager. A chill rippled through Lyra. She'd met Savannah Rivers only a handful of times, always polite, always helpful in the office. But seeing her name on Rowan's home phone, the familiarity implied, sent a bolt of anxiety through Lyra's chest. She clicked the phone awake as quietly as she could. The lock screen prompted, "Enter passcode." Her heart hammered. She knew the code, their anniversary date. With trembling fingers, she entered it. The messages thread opened to reveal a string of intimate text messages, sent and received, none meant for Lyra's eyes. At first, the texts were innocent enough. "Thanks for meeting me after work. Your support means the world. Can't wait to see you again." But as Lyra scrolled up, the tone shifted to something more fervent. "Last night was magical. I miss the way you look at me. I can't stop thinking about you." His replies betrayed him with equal ardor. "I shouldn't have let you leave. You're the only one who truly understands me. Let's plan another late-night rendezvous." The screen blurred as tears pricked Lyra's eyes. She read message after message, each one a dagger. The final damning text was timestamped just hours ago. "I need you tonight. Come by my place after your hospital shift. I'll be waiting." Lyra's breath caught. Her hands shook so violently, she nearly dropped the phone. Rowan had invited Savannah into his world, and into their marriage bed. The realization slammed into her like a freight train. She set the phone down on the desk and rose, legs unsteady. Behind her, Rowan finally looked up, bleary-eyed. "Lyra," he said, voice gentle, unaware of the confession glowing on his screen. Lyra swallowed, voice quivering. "What is this?" she whispered, motioning toward his phone. His brow furrowed, and he reached for the device, but Lyra recoiled. "Don't touch it," she said. "Just explain." Rowan rose slowly, chair scraping against hardwood. "Lyra," he began, but she cut him off, tears now freely flowing. "Explain why you've been telling her that last night was magical. Explain why you invited her to your apartment after midnight. Explain why you've been lying to me for weeks." He ran a hand through his hair, shoulders slumped. "It isn't what you think," he tried. We never," his words faltered under her incredulous gaze. Lyra's voice rose, trembling with disbelief. "Isn't what I think. You think it's normal to have someone else waiting for you in the dark? You think I'm supposed to stand by and watch my husband chase after his coworker like some teenage affair?" Rowan closed his eyes, his voice hoarse. "I was confused. You've been so busy." And I felt distant. Savannah was always there, supporting me, listening to me when I needed to talk. "Savannah was there," Lyra echoed bitterly. "She was there instead of me. She was there while I held our child through sleepless nights. She was there in our home, cooking for you, fixing your dinner. And you let her." His shoulders shook as he spoke. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt alone." He reached for her hand, and Lyra pulled away. "Alone?" she cried. "I was alone with our son for weeks. I cried alone in the dark while you were building dreams without me." He closed the distance again, tears shining in his eyes. "Lyra, please don't leave me." She lifted a trembling finger. Don't please me. You made your choice. You chose her. I'm done being the safety net you exploit when you need comfort." Lyra's world tilted as she turned and fled the room, baby monitor in hand. She hurried down the hallway, the nursery door framing a sleeping Ezra. The sight of his peaceful face brought fresh tears. She scooped him up, pressing him close, her sorrow now numbing her limbs. Rowan followed, calling her name. "Lyra, wait." She held the bassinet door closed between them. "I can't do this," she whispered, voice breaking. "Not anymore." He sank heavily to the floor outside her son's room, head in his hands. Lyra padded quietly to the laundry basket, tearing off her wedding ring and dropping it in without a glance. The soft metal clinked against fabric. It was the catalyst for her resolve. She would protect their child, but not at the cost of her own self-respect. With Ezra cradled in one arm, Lyra walked to the bedroom closet and slipped into a travel bag she'd packed earlier that day for a rare night away. In dawn's first pale light, she left their home behind. Each step down the hall felt like tearing a piece of her heart away, and yet her feet moved forward, carrying her to a new life beyond Rowan's betrayal. Outside, the world was silent. Lyra stepped into the morning air, her son's breath warm against her collarbone. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew two things. The trust between her and Rowan was irrevocably broken, and she would never again allow someone else's choices to define her worth. With baby Ezra clutched close, Lyra Carrington vowed that their second chance would be written without Rowan Blackwood in the margins. Lyra Carrington didn't look back. As the early morning light filtered through the slats of her moving van, she tightened her grip on baby Ezra's car seat handle, feeling the weight of both her son and her resolve. The key to her new apartment, a modest studio on the third floor of a renovated brownstone in Silver Lake, was cool and unfamiliar in her hand. She inhaled deeply, the clean scent of fresh paint and polished hardwood mingling with the faint aroma of brewing coffee from the cafe below. Inside, Marlo Quinn, her friend since medical school, had already transformed the bare space into a warm sanctuary. Pale gray walls were alive with framed photographs, Lyra's residency graduation, Rowan and Lyra beneath lanterns on their wedding day, and several of little Ezra's first smiles. A plush cream sofa faced a tiny kitchenette, and in the corner, Indigo Hale's gift, a rocking chair upholstered in soft teal, waited beside Ezra's crib. A single potted fiddle-leaf fig stood sentinel next to a stack of newborn clothes neatly folded on a mahogany dresser. Marlo, wearing an apron speckled with paint, greeted Lyra with a hug that spoke volumes. "Welcome home," she whispered, tucking a strand of Lyra's hair behind her ear. "I've been dying to show you what Indigo and I have been up to." Lyra closed her eyes against the sunlight, overwhelmed by their kindness. "It's perfect," she managed. "Thank you, both of you." Indigo, perched in the rocking chair with Ezra cooing in her lap, nodded. "You take care of yourself. We'll handle dinner." Her voice was gentle but firm, a nurse's reassurance in domestic form. Over the next hour, Lyra wandered through each corner of her new refuge, absorbing the clarity the clean lines brought to her mind. Here, no unanswered texts from Rowan. No humming of construction machinery.
No beeping monitors.
Only the soft whir of the apartment's air filter and the rhythmic snug-snug of Indigo rocking Ezra to sleep. She sank onto the sofa, pulling a throw blanket around her shoulders. The weight of betrayal still lingered in her chest, an ache honed by each confession on Rowan's phone. But for the first time in months, she felt the stirrings of hope. She glanced at her phone's blank screen, the absence of pinging notifications a strange relief. Marlo set down 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "You need rest," she said, sliding onto the love seat. "Tell me everything when you're ready." Lyra wrapped her hands around the warm mug, sipping gently. She let the heat travel through her, unspooling the tight coil of fear and anger inside. Marlo listened in silent solidarity, knowing words were scarce when heartache was deep. By afternoon, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, painting the room in soft amber. Lyra stood in the kitchenette, stirring a pot of chicken broth and ginger, a recipe Indigo swore would soothe the soul. The familiar movements grounded her. The careful slice of ginger on the cutting board, the steady simmer of broth, the steam rising in gentle tendrils. Cooking, she realized, could be a form of medicine too. When the aroma reached Indigo's ears, she rose from the rocking chair. "Smells heavenly," Indigo said, tucking Ezra back into his crib, each movement practiced with maternal certainty. "You should sit down. I've got detergent in the wash for those little socks you didn't pack." Lyra laughed for the first time in weeks, a quiet, resonant sound. She settled at the tiny table as Indigo brought a platter of toasted bread. Over broth and warm slices, Lyra told them about her plan to take a short leave of absence from the hospital. "Just a week or 2, to rebuild her strength and finalize her board certification applications. "I want to get back to work," she said, eyes bright. "But on my terms and with energy left for both Ezra and myself." Marlo raised her mug in a toast. "To new beginnings." Indigo's nod echoed the sentiment. That evening, after Ezra's bedtime, Lyra extended her gratitude to William Porter, the kindly landlord who had shown her the apartment. Over cups of mint tea in the courtyard, she told him she hoped to contribute to the building's little community, perhaps organizing a new parents' meetup for mothers and fathers on their floors. William beamed. "This building has been missing that," he said. "You'll be the heart of it." Lyra felt a spark of exhilaration. Here was a chance not only to heal but to flourish, to create support networks she and Ezra could lean on when she returned to the hospital. The following morning, Lyra loaded Ezra into his stroller and ventured downstairs to the neighborhood's artisan market. By chance, she ran into Dr. Nia Sharma, a pediatric neurologist at Starlight who often came here for kombucha and conversation. Lyra braced herself, uncertain how Nia would greet her after her abrupt departure from the ward. Nia swept forward with an envelope in hand. "I was hoping to catch you," she said, concern evident in her tone. "Your patients miss you, but I understand why you needed space. I have a few interesting case studies that might suit your expertise, only if and when you're ready." Lyra smiled gratefully. "Thank you. I plan to come back soon, clearer, stronger." Nia clasped her hand. "We'll be here." As she strolled home beneath banyan trees, Lyra allowed herself to savor the simple joy of community connections. Every handshake, every familiar face in the marketplace bridged her past and future. She realized that returning to medicine didn't mean erasing her betrayal or exhaustion. It meant practicing self-compassion on a grander scale. That afternoon, she set up a small playgroup in the courtyard for building families. 5 other mothers and 1 harried father arrived with infants in tow. Lyra exchanged tips on swaddling and bottle warming, sharing Indigo's comforting advice. Laughter echoed among the potted ferns and a mismatched collection of lawn chairs. Ezra, perched in Lyra's arms, gurgled with delight as he watched his tiny neighbors coo and squirm. As dusk settled, Lyra stood back and took it all in: the soft-colored sky, the glow of apartment windows, the gentle hum of cordial conversation. Her daring leap away from Rowan's betrayal had landed her here, a place of acceptance, kindness, and fresh hope. Back in the living room, she found Rowan's wedding photo on the mantel, lantern fair. Echo pines, gifted by Marlo in a moment of longing for the past. Lyra picked up the frame, studying the lantern-lit smiles of her and Rowan. A memory flickered: Rowan's vow beneath the pines. Vibrant and sincere. Though that chapter had ended, its echoes lingered as lessons learned. She set the frame down carefully among the photographs of friendship, nursing uniforms, and Ezra's first ultrasound image. That night, as Lyra tucked Ezra into his crib and dimmed the lights, she felt a new kind of peace lounge over her chest. She slipped into bed and texted Rowan one final message. "Lyra, I've moved forward. Please respect our space. Ezra and I are beginning anew." No reply came, and Lyra didn't expect one. She placed her phone face down on the bedside table and closed her eyes, breathing in the promise of tomorrow. In the hush of her studio apartment, with baby monitors soft buzzing and a community growing around her, Lyra Carrington realized she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her past had shaped her, but it would no longer define her path. The healing had begun, and with each sunrise, Lyra embraced the mosaic of tomorrow's possibilities. Lyra Carrington sat in the softly lit waiting room of Harbor Fertility Center, the hum of the ventilation system a low accompaniment to the nervous flutter in her chest. Sunlight streamed through frosted glass panels, casting gentle patterns on the pale wood floor. Next to her, a stack of glossy brochures detailed success stories of hope and heartbreak. Couples celebrating new life after years of struggle, others still in the throes of unanswered when. She stared at one story in particular, the Martinez family, From despair to joy, a montage of smiling faces, parents cradling twins, toddlers clutching teddy bears with toothless grins. Lyra's fingers trembled as she flipped the brochure closed. Beside her, Indigo Hale, the retired nurse-turned-babysitter who'd become Lyra's steadfast guardian, offered a comforting hand to squeeze. "We'll get through this, dear," Indigo whispered, voice soft as gauze. Lyra managed a small nod and rose as her name was called. She followed Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in reproductive endocrinology, down a hallway lined with botanical photographs, morning glories, orchards of plum trees, in full bloom. The irony wasn't lost on Lyra. She, a healer who saved lives every day, now needed help to create one. In Dr. Vasquez's office, clinical yet warm, Lyra took a seat across from the doctor's desk. The doctor's calm presence offered reassurance. Tailored gray blazer, silver-rimmed glasses, approachable smile. "Lyra, I've reviewed your tests and ultrasound results," Dr. Vasquez began, hands folded. Lyra held her breath. "You have what we call diminished ovarian reserve," Dr. Vasquez said gently. "In plain terms, your egg count is lower than expected for your age." A hushed silence followed. On the medical chart projected behind the doctor, a graph plotted Lyra's hormone levels, AMH readings below the normal range. Lyra's world narrowed. She recalled the moment she first held baby Ezra, the miracle of life she'd helped create. Yet here she was, a devoted mother, told she might not do it again. "Is it?" Lyra's voice cracked. "Is it hopeless?" Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "Not hopeless, but challenging. We have several paths. High-dose ovarian stimulation for in vitro fertilization, egg donation, or, if you prefer, exploring adoption. Each option has its own timeline and emotional hurdles." Lyra closed her eyes. Images flashing. Rowan's face when she'd left, Ezra's trusting gaze, nights alone with her worries. She drew in a shaky breath. "I want options," she said, voice firmer. "Tell me what IVF would look like." Dr. Vasquez outlined the protocol. Daily injections of gonadotropins to stimulate follicles, frequent blood draws, and ultrasounds. An egg retrieval procedure under light anesthesia, then fertilization with partner or donor sperm in the lab, followed by embryo transfer. She noted the success rates, lower for poor responders, but also offered encouragement. "Your medical history aside, this isn't the final chapter." Lyra nodded, gratitude mingling with fear. She asked about medications, side effects, costs. Indigo took diligent notes. As they wrapped up, Dr. Vasquez handed Lyra a thick packet of instructions and support group contact information. "Take your time," she advised. "It's a marathon, not a sprint." Back home in her Silver Lake studio, Lyra stared at the packet on her kitchen counter while Ezra napped in his crib. Marlo Quinn joined her, eager to help. "What did she say?" Marlo asked, pouring 2 mugs of honey ginger tea. Lyra sipped, swallowing trepidation. "It's doable," she admitted. "But it won't be easy." Over the next week, Lyra educated herself relentlessly, reading academic articles, joining online forums, calling the support group numbers Dr. Vasquez provided. She mapped out her cycle on a calendar app, noting injection start dates and ultrasound appointments. Indigo volunteered to stay overnight with Ezra on days Lyra needed blood work, and Marlo arranged flexible coverage at the clinic to share her work. When her first medication kit arrived, a cold pack of syringes, vials of follicle-stimulating hormone, needles, alcohol swabs, Lyra's hands shook. She followed the injection guide meticulously, her pulse pounding as she administered the first dose into her abdomen. Indigo hovered nearby, offering a reassuring arm around her shoulders. "You're stronger than you know," Indigo said. "One day at a time." That evening, Lyra recorded her vitals in a leather-bound notebook. Dosage, time, feelings. Every morning and night, she injected, monitored, and noted. Some days, her stomach ached. Other days, she was simply exhausted. Yet she found unexpected solidarity among her new online sisterhood of women navigating the same gauntlet, shared tips for bruising, jokes about being a human pincushion. and words of fierce encouragement. At her first monitoring appointment, the ultrasound room was hushed. Lyra lay draped in a hospital gown as Dr. Vasquez performed a transvaginal ultrasound. On the screen, circular dark spots, her antral follicles, numbered only 5, where 20 might have been ideal. Dr. Vasquez studied the images. "These are responding to medication," she said, pointing to the small but visible growth. "We'll continue. You're a slow responder, but we'll do our best." Lyra exhaled relief. It wasn't a flood of 15 mature eggs, but it was something. She visualized each follicle as a promise, a chance. As days passed, the pattern repeated: inject, monitor, tweak dosage. Marlo cooked nutritious meals and Indigo tucked Ezra into the stroller for fresh air walks, allowing Lyra fleeting moments of calm. Lyra's colleagues at the hospital offered quiet support, the chief resident slipping her coffee with a note of solidarity. "Thinking of you." Then, at the pivotal retrieval appointment, Lyra arrived early, heart pounding. Under light anesthesia, the embryologist whispered through the glass, 6 follicles retrieved. Lyra heard digits bounce in her mind. 6. Enough. Better than 0. In the observation suite, she awakened to find Dr. Vasquez smiling proudly. 6 mature eggs, the doctor said. "We'll inseminate them with Rowan's sperm and see how many fertilize." Dr. Vasquez outlined the next steps. Culture the embryos for 5 days, perform genetic screening to select the healthiest, then planned an embryo transfer. Lyra's throat tightened with gratitude. She pressed her palm against her chest, steadying her racing heart. "Thank you," she murmured. At home, Lyra and Indigo celebrated quietly. Tea and dark chocolate, a small victory under gilded lamps. That night, Lyra felt the subtle shifts within her body as hormones churned. She knew the next week would test her patience: days of waiting, personal monitoring, and emotional tidal waves. When Dr. Vasquez called 2 days later, Lyra answered with bated breath. 4 fertilized, the doctor reported. 2 high-quality blastocysts ready for biopsy next week. Tears sprang unbidden to Lyra's eyes. 4. A miracle beyond her expectations. Indigo squeezed her hand through the phone. Lyra hung up and sank onto the sofa, allowing herself a rare moment of pure hope. Rowan had watched their marriage shatter. Now, she was building new dreams, this time fueled by community, expertise, and her own fierce determination. That weekend, Lyra hosted a small gathering for her new circle: Marlo, Indigo, and 3 other women from the support group. They toasted with sparkling elderflower water to courage, resilience, and the promise of those 4 tiny lives budding in the lab. Lyra shared her gratitude, not just for the medical breakthrough, but for the network of hands and hearts that lifted her when she felt she might break. As Ezra giggled in Indigo's arms, Lyra stepped to the window and looked out at the hills of Los Angeles. She breathed in the scent of jasmine and freshly washed linens. The path had been rocky, strewn with needles and tears, but she had never felt stronger. With each challenge, she'd rediscovered facets of herself she never knew existed: vulnerability, tenacity, and a capacity for hope that shone brighter than any setback. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Vasquez. "Schedule embryo biopsy for Wednesday. Let's do this." Lyra tapped out her reply, "Let's." In that single word lay all her resolve, her commitment to life, to motherhood, and to forging a future that would honor both her strength and her willingness to ask for help. The fertility trial was far from over, but Lyra Carrington faced it with renewed faith. A heart mended by community, guided by science, and buoyed by the precious promise of new beginnings. Lyra Carrington stepped into the conference room at Starlight Memorial Hospital with a calm confidence that belied the whirlwind of recent months. The panel of senior administrators and community stakeholders waited for her, their expressions courteous but expectant. Behind her, the digital projector displayed the title slide in soft teal lettering: Youth Wellness Hub, a model for holistic pediatric care. 12 months earlier, Lyra's life had splintered under the weight of betrayal, exhaustion, and uncertainty. But now, standing before colleagues and city leaders, she embodied renewal. Her silk blouse and tailored blazer carried no trace of the hospital scrub she'd worn through countless night shifts. Here, she was not just a doctor, she was a visionary. "Thank you all for being here," Lyra began, voice steady and warm. "Today, we have an opportunity to transform pediatric healthcare in Los Angeles by creating a center that heals not just bodies, but minds and communities." She clicked the remote, and the slide shifted to renderings of a low-rise building wrapped in leafy vines, broad windows opening onto community gardens, and a multi-purpose courtyard where children played beneath pergolas. "As healthcare providers, we see children at their most vulnerable," she continued. "But too often, they lack access to safe, nurturing environments that support their overall well-being. By integrating medical services, mental health counseling, art and music therapy, and after-school enrichment, all under one roof, we can address the root causes of health disparities and foster resilience from a young age." The room was silent. Lyra's words resonated because they sprang from lived experience, nights spent comforting families after trauma, years volunteering at the moonlit lantern fair, sleepless hours balancing bedside care with baby bottles. Her passion was palpable, her conviction unshakable. She walked them through the project's phases. Community assessment, Q1, Q2. Engage local families, schools, and neighborhood leaders to identify needs. Design and planning, Q3, Q4. Collaborate with architects from Blackwood and Company to draft patient and family-centered spaces. Construction, Year 2. Build with sustainable materials, ensuring universal accessibility and flexible program rooms. Launch and evaluation, Year 3. Open doors, gather outcome data, and refine services based on family feedback. Rowan Blackwood's architectural renderings glowed behind her, curved corridors for sensory-friendly navigation, bright art alcoves for creative expression, and a rooftop garden where patients could plant vegetables as part of nutritional workshops. Lyra paused on that slide, letting the vision sink in. "We're partnering with Mercy Meals, LA Arts Council, and local school districts," she said, clicking to a slide listing community partners. "By integrating food security programs, collaborative art installations, and school-based referrals, we ensure every child who walks through our doors finds a support network." Dr. Min-jae Park, the hospital's chief administrator, leaned forward. "These goals are ambitious, Lyra. Do you have the budget projections?" Lyra nodded. A click revealed a detailed budget breakdown, capital costs offset by state grants, philanthropy, and a social impact bond, operational expenses covered by blended insurance reimbursements and sliding scale fees for uninsured families. "We've secured preliminary funding from the Children's Health Foundation and applied for the Federal Community Wellness Grant. With your approval, we can close the funding gap by year 1. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the room. Dr. Park nodded gravely, then turned to the city council liaison beside him. "Councilmember Diaz, your constituents will welcome this." Councilmember Sonia Diaz smiled, her phone already recording. "This is the type of innovation our city needs. I'll champion this at City Hall." Lyra exhaled softly, the tension draining from her shoulders in relief and gratitude. The meeting concluded with unanimous support and a promise of immediate action. As the participants filtered out, colleagues patted Lyra on the back, thanking her for spearheading the initiative. That afternoon, Lyra retreated to her new Silver Lake studio. She slid into her desk chair, fingers trembling with excitement. She opened her email to find a message from Dr. Nia Sharma. "Congratulations. I'd love to co-author a paper on integrated pediatric models for the Journal of Child Health Innovations. When can we meet?" Lyra replied with a flourish. "How about tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Outside." The late afternoon sun painted the hillside in gold. Lyra paused before the community notice board by the cafe, a poster for the upcoming farmers market playgroup, another for the neighborhood watch. Small reminders of her second home. She felt the gentle tug of balance returning. Family, community, career, all interwoven. The next morning, amidst the hum of MRI machines and the whir of ventilators, Lyra felt a renewed sense of purpose. She rounded on pediatric patients, discussing asthma care and vaccine schedules with their parents, then slipped away to conduct a joint round on social determinants of health with Dr. Park. That afternoon, she dashed to the county planning office, coffee in hand, to finalize zoning approvals. Each meeting, each corridor, reinforced her belief that healthcare extended far beyond hospital walls. By mid-month, the project garnered media attention. A local news crew filmed Lyra leading patients through a mock-up of the hub's art therapy room, bright murals, easels set up for watercolors. As she encouraged a shy 10-year-old with a paintbrush, the reporter captured her in action, her eyes alight with compassion and vision. The segment aired that evening with the headline, "Dr. Design's Dream Space for Healing and Hope." Rowan watched the broadcast at Blackwood and Company, pride and wonder mingling in his expression. He called Lyra afterward. "You looked incredible," he said. "The world is finally seeing what I always knew." Lyra smiled into the phone. "We did it," she corrected, thinking of every volunteer, donor, and colleague. When the ground broke on the site in Echo Pines 3 months later, a small crowd gathered under a pale sky. Lyra stood beside Rowan, Marlowe, Indigo, and Councilmember Diaz. Children from the neighborhood raised shovels painted in bright primary colors. As the crowd cheered and the first dirt flew, Lyra felt a burst of exhilaration. A tangible beginning to the vision she and her community had fought so hard to realize. Later, as she walked the unfinished foundations with her hard hat in hand, she overheard the site manager praise her leadership. "Every contractor knows her name now," he said. "She's unstoppable." Lyra allowed herself a quiet laugh. Not unstoppable. Rather, unstoppable in her willingness to ask for help, to build community, and to translate compassion into concrete change. That evening, she hosted a small celebratory gathering at her studio. Indigo baked lavender shortbread, Marlowe hung strings of fairy lights, and Ezra, teething and curious, reached for the glowing bulbs with tiny fingers. Lyra raised her glass, mint lime infusion, to her guests. "To every helping hand," she said. "This project is proof that healing begins when we combine expertise with empathy." As the lights twinkled above, Lyra Carrington felt her life finally align. The doctor who cared for patients, the mother who nourished a child, the advocate who listened to her community, and the visionary who turned blueprints into hope. Her career had not merely survived the trials of the past year, it had ignited, guided by purpose and sustained by a village of supporters. In the hush of that evening, surrounded by friends old and new, Lyra realized that her path forward would always include challenges. But she had learned how to face them with honesty, resilience, and an ever-deepening network of community. Her star was rising not by lone brilliance, but by the constellation of caring souls she brought together. And as she tucked Ezra into bed once more, she whispered a promise. She would continue to build spaces where every child's spark could shine. Lyra Carrington stood on the edge of the hub's newly planted butterfly garden, the late afternoon sun gilding sprays of lavender and goldenrod. Around her, families finished art therapy sessions. Children laughed as they chased monarchs flitting between milkweed stalks, and soft conversation drifted from the outdoor classroom's rows of upcycled benches. 12 months earlier, Lyra could scarcely have imagined herself here. Never would she have believed that a collapse at home, a harrowing discovery of her husband's betrayal, and a desperate fertility quest would lead her to this moment of radiant purpose. Yet the most powerful force at her back had never been ambition or expertise, but friendship. The unbreakable bonds that carried her through every storm and bore her up to this dawn. She inhaled deeply, savoring the fragrance of fresh earth and lavender, and let her gaze drift across the trellised vines now bursting with wild roses. Each bloom felt like a testament to the collective strength of those who had refused to let her fall apart. As the visiting pediatric psychiatrist shared guidelines for mindfulness exercises, Lyra's mind traced the constellation of friends who had restored her belief in possibility. First came Marlowe Quinn, her roommate through medical school's crucible of exams and 24-hour call nights. Marlowe had always believed in Lyra's brilliance. From her earliest stethoscope-laden days through the long stretches of postpartum sacrifice. When Lyra first fled her marital home, Marlowe threw open her apartment door, blank canvas sheets at the ready, and painted Lyra's nursery in calming hues of seafoam and sunrise. Marlowe then designed baby Ezra's first book of hand-illustrated lullabies. She had stayed up decorating every inch of Lyra's new Silver Lake studio, stringing lanterns, hanging tapestries, arranging succulents, in a silent vow that Lyra's next chapter would be bright. Without Marlowe's unflagging creativity and cheer, Lyra's world would still be painted in the bleak grays of betrayal and burnout. Then there was Indigo Hale, the retired ER nurse whose gravelly voice had first knocked on Lyra's door that desperate night when dehydration and heartbreak almost claimed her. Indigo, with her silver bun hairstyle and the soft jingle of keys on her broad belt loop, had never flinched at Lyra's phone calls at 2 a.m, whether for emergency babysitting or a heart-to-heart over chamomile tea. When Lyra embarked on her grueling IVF injections, Indigo arrived unbidden with syringes warmed in her palm, coaching Lyra through each needle prick. On the day of the embryo transfer, Indigo held Lyra's hand in the sterile operating room, whispering mantras until Lyra drifted under anesthetic. If friendship was measured in acts of sacrificial kindness, Indigo's quiet devotion was the gold standard. Lyra's professional ally, Dr. Nia Sharma, stood just to her right now, clipboard in hand. Nia, once a senior resident whose podium-ready lectures Lyra had watched in awe, had become her research partner and sounding board. When Lyra pitched the integrated pediatric model that would evolve into the hub, it was Nia who pored over grant applications with her, rewriting budget sections and reworking outcome metrics. It was Nia who tracked down conference invitations and urged Lyra to present their data to national audiences.
Tonight,
Nia would deliver a keynote on the hub's early successes to a coalition of public health leaders. Their friendship, bound by mutual respect and intellectual rigor, had elevated Lyra's vision from local project to national exemplar. Beyond these stalwarts were the women from her fertility support circle, Cassie, whose wry humor carried Lyra through bruised injection sites, Jenna, whose adoption journey taught Lyra strength beyond biology, and Hannah, whose nightly video check-ins over green tea were a lifeline in the darkest days of uncertainty. Each had loaned Lyra not only empathy, but battle-hardened wisdom. When Lyra called at dawn after spotting a failed embryo, it was Cassie who drafted an uplifting playlist, and Jenna who offered to share her own homeschool lesson plans for distraction. These friendships, forged in vulnerability, reminded Lyra that motherhood and life could flourish under many guises. Amid the bustle of families departing the garden, Lyra caught Marlowe's eye and raised her hand in a small wave. Marlowe swept her arm in return before guiding a shy little girl to the paint station, where she was creating a vibrant mosaic of handprints. Every friendship, Lyra realized, had been a brushstroke in this grand mural of her recovery and renewal. Rowan Blackwood, once the architect of Lyra's heartbreak, now stood a few feet away, demonstrating a child-friendly rainwater harvesting feature to 2 enthusiastic young engineers in training. He'd spent the last year rebuilding trust, not through grand gestures, but by honoring small commitments and learning the art of genuine accountability. Their renewed partnership was a testament to the possibility of forgiveness, sustained by the broader community's embrace. Yet it was camaraderie, rather than romantic love, that had buoyed Lyra most deeply. Lyra turned back to Nia, who caught her gaze and offered a knowing smile. The keynote speech awaited, and Lyra knew that with Nia's support, she would speak not just as a physician, but as a survivor and advocate. She raised her chin, steeling herself for the next act, and Nia slipped a supportive arm around her shoulders. As the assembled guests flocked to the podium area, pediatric nurses, school counselors, local artists, Lyra drew a final breath of jasmine-tinged air. She stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the stone pathway, and the crowd hushed in anticipation. Her voice rang clear. Thank you all for believing in our children, our future. This hub stands as proof that no one heals alone. Our care teams, our volunteers, our city partners, and above all, the friendships that anchor us, have created a place where every child can feel seen, heard, and valued. Applause rippled outward, warm and genuine. Children giggled at their own handprints. Parents nodded in gratitude, and Rowan's eyes glistened in the sun. Above them, the vines swayed, petals drifting down as though the garden itself celebrated the moment. Later that night, as Lyra walked home under a canopy of fairy lights strung between the brownstones, she pressed her phone to her ear for a late-hour, celebratory call to Marlowe in New York. Marlowe's cheery voice spilled through the line. "You were magnificent. I cried at the garden story." Lyra laughed, leaning against the cool brick facade. "I couldn't have done any of it without you," she said, heartful. When she hung up, she spotted Indigo waiting in the doorway of her studio, rocking Ezra to sleep. Nia lingered nearby with a slice of lavender shortbread. The three women crossed the threshold together, sharing laughter and hugs as the city's pulse thrummed around them. In her quiet kitchen, Lyra poured tea for her friends and savored the simple joy of connection. No agenda, no projector slides, just warmth, empathy, and the unspoken acknowledgement that their friendship had been her guiding star. As she sipped, Lyra reflected on the dark days that had threatened to eclipse her life. She had discovered betrayal in her home, exhaustion in her heart, and the fragility of hope in the fertility clinic. But she had also found in her friends a steadfast harbor, a collective courage that transformed despair into resilience. Years hence, when the Hub's alumni gathered to plant replacement vines and celebrate countless healthy arrivals, they would speak of the doctor who envisioned healing beyond medicine. Yet Lyra's greatest legacy would not be the gleaming building or the published research, but the friendships that never wavered, unyielding anchors in every storm, the truest measure of grace and solidarity. And as the moon rose over the city, Lyra, Marlowe, Indigo, and Nia moved among the ivy-wrapped columns, their laughter blending with the night's gentle breeze, a testament to the unbreakable ties that had shaped her life and would guide her always. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.